Starting off at number 10 now, we have peak population. For all of our lives, the total population of the world has been rising. But did you ever know that it might stop or even reverse? Research by the Dutch Bank in 2013 claimed that Earth will reach 8.7 billion people in 2055, and then the population will start to drop. Now, this doesn't mean that millions of people are going to be killed. It will simply mean that the population explosion that has been happening for the past 100 years or so will level out as families have fewer and fewer children, especially in places like China and India. For the first time in living memory, you could live to see the maximum number of humans that will ever exist, at least here on Earth.
In our number 9 spot today, we have the Robertson family. The Robertson family truly has one of the most interesting stories I have ever heard. The family decided to take a boat out for a while as a way to experience more and learn some exceptionally valuable lessons. The family, consisting of a husband, wife, and 4 children, had decided that they would stop at each port along the way, which meant that they had pretty limited supplies on the journey with them. While they were on their boat, a group of killer whales ended up attacking their boat, which caused severe damage, and the boat began to take on water. At this time, all they had on board with them was food enough for 6 days, a small little dinghy, and a lifeboat. Somehow the family survived for 28 full days using the lifeboat and the dinghy, but also by eating and drinking rainwater and turtles that they had hunted and collected. The family ended up being rescued when they were found by Japanese fishermen. In our number 8 spot today, we have Kelly Peters. Okay, so this story starts out with Kelly Peters, who is a California mom and the president of the Parent Teachers Association. One day she was pulled over by the police and they found some devil's lettuce in her car. I'm calling it that because I can't really say its real name, and if you don't get the reference, then that's exactly the reason why I can't see the word. Anyway, so the officer finds this jazz cabbage and Kelly starts swearing she's never seen it before and has absolutely no idea where it came from. Yeah, Kelly, we've all tried to use that excuse before, except it turns out it wasn't actually an excuse at all. So Kelly worked at the school in an unpaid volunteer position, and there was some sort of minor incident that led to another student's parents, Kent and Jill Easter, to seek out and try and ruin Kelly's life. Again, for this super small, super minor incident where the Easter's child was just late for pickup and Kelly said it was because he's slow. That's literally what happened. So first, the Easters sent the principal a letter asking that Kelly be fired from her position at the school that was again a volunteer unpaid position. When that didn't happen, Jill filed a restraining order against Kelly, claiming that she was stalking the family. The court threw it out because obviously there was no proof of that. So after these failed attempts, Kent went for a civil suit saying that Kelly locked their son outside of the school for 19 minutes on the day that he was late for pickup. Since this all failed, they then planted the stuff we talked about before, and then they called the police and said that they saw someone driving erratically, which is now where we started the story. So the police searched her car, they searched her home, and they gave Kelly a field sobriety test. She passed the test and there was no signs of any of these kinds of substances anywhere else in her life. But on the substances, they did find DNA belonging to both of the Easters. Oh, what a surprise! Anyway, the case obviously went to trial, the Easters split up and both received jail time, and Kelly's name was officially cleared. I always knew that there was drama with parents at the same school, but I didn't realize just how much. In our number 7 spot today, we have Christopher Knight. Christopher is a person who is quite reclusive and he lived alone in the woods in Maine. He loved being alone and loved living a simple life, which definitely sounds fine enough, and it's said that, save for 2 brief interactions, he lived without human contact for 27 years from 1986 to 2013. I'm certainly not judging, I'm genuinely just wondering what that sort of a thing would do to a person. Here's where things get sort of unbelievable though. While living this totally secluded life, he was living in the woods of Maine, like I said before, but he was living in a small camp that he had set up that was kind of hidden from everyone because it was within a cluster of glacial erratic boulders. When he entered the woods, he had almost no possessions, which of course would make things difficult to survive, but he made a little home that was set up for himself out of entirely stolen items. That's right, this guy would go around to other camps and cabins nearby lie and steal their stuff, roughly 40 burglaries a year in order to continue on surviving while having no contact with anyone else. I guess the guy didn't really have any scary motives, but of course you absolutely cannot steal people's belongings. Eventually he was caught mid-burglary and he confessed to all of the other crimes, and he did describe his understanding of how unethical his behavior was, and it was determined he was very unlikely to reoffend. Christopher spent 7 months in jail, he paid $2,000 in restitution, and he completed a court program and 3 years of probation. After his release, he went on to meet with the judge every week, he avoided alcohol, and he secured a job with his brother. There have been many articles written about Christopher's pretty fascinating story, and people are always trying to get to the bottom of why he lived his life like this. He's quite reluctant to share, but what he has said is, quote, "Solitude bestows an increase in something valuable. My perception. But when I applied my increased perception to myself, I lost my identity. There was no audience, no one to perform for. To put it romantically, I was completely free." In our number 6 spot today, we have Linda Riss. Okay, this is a story that actually has a movie that was made about it, so you know it's a wild one. Basically, Burt Pugak and Linda Riss basically fell in love at first sight in 1959. They were crazy for each other and things seemed like complete paradise for the couple. Until Linda discovered that Burt was already married with children and that she called off the affair. This is when Burt turned into even more of a psycho and he began to threaten Linda. He said, quote, "If I can't have you, no one else will have you, and when I get through with you, no one else will want you." Burt needs to chill the heck out, but he did the exact opposite of that when he heard that Linda had gotten engaged to another man. He then paid 3 assailants to toss lye into Linda's face, which left her blind in one eye, nearly blind in the other, and with permanent scarring. Burt was convicted of the horrible crime and spent 14 years in prison, but while he was in there, he continually wrote letters to Linda. This story is already wild enough, but it does not end here. Upon his release from prison in 1974, Burt and Linda resumed their relationship. They co-wrote a book together about the whole ordeal as well, and legal troubles were not over for Burt, however, as he was again accused of being harmful to a woman that he was having an affair with, and Linda testified at his trial as a character witness for Burt. Imagine being a character witness for someone who did that to you. I'm not judging, I just do not understand. Anyway, Linda went on to live until 2013, and Burt passed away basically a year ago now on December 24th, 2020. Their story will certainly live on because it is very bizarre. In our number 5 spot today, we have the art scandal. This story takes place at a local coffee shop in Binghamton, New York. I don't know how to say that city, sorry if I said it wrong. Basically, this shop started hanging colorful abstract paintings on its walls, and people visiting the shop began noticing and wanted to know who painted them and how much they could purchase them for. Well, the price was set to be around $253, and the artist? 3-year-old Marla Olmsted. This toddler quickly became a sensation in the media, and she was creating pieces that were selling at auctions for like $6,000. It was absolutely insane. To make this story even more wild, there was controversy over the paintings and whether or not her parents had helped the child create them. Are you kidding? Who cares if the parents helped her? You're still paying thousands of dollars for a child's piece of art. Don't get me wrong, there's some talented kids out there, and getting a piece of art from a kid always makes your heart melt, but $6,000 worth of heart melting? I'm not so sure. Like the kids using Crayola paint. Anyway, do you think this was a case of a child prodigy, or were these people getting scammed? In our number 4 spot today, we have the Diamond Heist. So this story took place in 1940 during the Second World War and involves Colonel Montague, who is nicknamed Monty. So Monty was an undercover agent who was working with MI6, and when Germany began invading Amsterdam, Monty knew that they were going to try and go after some of the most valuable things, so instead of just waiting for them to be stolen, Monty decided to steal them first. You know, obviously to keep them safe. So basically, he somehow managed to get a key to the entrance of the Amsterdam diamond market. I don't know, I feel like everything about that should be a little more inconspicuous, but hey, it was the 1940s. Anyway, so he travels to the diamond place in just regular plain clothes, breaks in, but is it really breaking in if you have a key? I guess so because he wasn't supposed to have the key, but anyway, he breaks in, but he doesn't know the code to the vault. He thinks about past clues he's gathered to try and figure it out, and for 24 hours this man works on getting into the safe. Literally, as he hears German forces around the building about to get in, he manages to get into the vault and complete his heist. He traveled with the diamonds all the way back to England before turning the valuables back over to the Dutch government. See what I mean? This could totally be a movie for sure. In our number 3 spot today we have Doug Scott. Despite all of the risks that come with mountain climbing, people love to do it. When out in the elements, in the wilderness, things can quickly go awry, and when things are bad, it takes a different kind of person to somehow get through it, and that is clearly seen in the story of Doug Scott. Doug was descending from a mountain that had been nicknamed the Ogre, and something happened that caused him to break not one, but both of his legs. As I'm sure you can imagine, that is something that would make things pretty difficult when it comes to mountain climbing. Doug simply was not about to just give up though. This man crawled on his hands and knees for days, and he somehow managed to make it down off of the mountain alive. I talked about this story recently, but I had to bring it back up for this video because I simply just cannot believe the strength and willpower that Doug showed. When asked how he managed to stay alive, Doug was all blasé about his insane survival skills and said, quote, "It was no problem because I'd only broken both tibia. If I'd broken my femur, then I've no doubt I'd still be on that mountain." Doug could definitely have a movie made about him. In our number 2 spot today we have Sidney Riley. Sidney has a life story that is truly a movie waiting to happen. He was born in Odessa, Russia, and was the son of a landowner and was brilliant right from the beginning. He was a talented linguist and learned how to speak over 7 languages while I'm over here struggling with 1. When he was 19 years old, he snuck onto a ship that was headed to Brazil as a little stowaway. Once in Brazil, he took on a series of different regular jobs in order to make ends meet, but one day as he was cooking for some British explorers, he was attacked. He managed to fend all of the people off himself, and it managed to impress all of those around him. Basically, after witnessing his exceptional skill set, they all turned to him and said, "Have you ever considered being a part of the Secret Service?" Sidney then went on to spy training, and after this he was sent back to Russia in order to collect information. He earned himself the nickname the Ace of Spies. There are rumors that he is actually the person who inspired Mr. Bond himself. In 1905 he tricked an oil concession holder into selling oil to Britain, which in the end really benefited Britain's future energy supplies. In the end, in 1925, Sidney was in Russia when he was finally caught and ended up being executed. There are so many things in stories about Sidney and his missions and all of the things that he did that there is definitely an action-packed movie just waiting to be made about him. In our number 1 spot today we have The Rescue. This is a story that a lot of us will probably remember because it happened just a few short years ago in June and July of 2018. Basically, on June 23rd of that year, 12 members of a Thai football team, all ranging in age from 11 to 16, and their 25-year-old football coach entered a cave after a practice. Shortly after they entered, extremely heavy rainfall ended up flooding the cave and trapping all of the boys. For more than a week, no contact was made with the boys, and it was uncertain exactly where they were or if they were still alive. The rescue efforts attracted attention from all over the world because this wasn't just any rescue effort. Because of the rain and the constant flooding, this required highly specialized and skilled cave divers, and there's not a ton of those hanging around. British divers John Valanthin and Richard Stanton volunteered their time and expertise, and on July 2nd, they were able to locate all of the missing boys alive. The problem, however, is that the group was about a 4-kilometer cave dive away from getting out, which provided a whole bunch of new risks, and the cave was only becoming more and more flooded as each day passed. There was so much that went into these rescues, and it was so dangerous that a member of the Thai Navy SEALs, Saman Kunan, passed away during a rescue operation, and another SEAL, Barut Pakbara, passed away in 2019 due to a blood infection that he contracted during the operations. In the end, all of the boys and their coach were miraculously saved after 18 days of being stranded, thanks to a ton of volunteers who risked their lives to help. There's an absolutely fascinating, heart-wrenching, unbelievable documentary that was created by the incomparable adventure photographer and videographer Jimmy Chin, who also created Free Solo if you've seen that, and it details the entire operation from beginning to end. It is called The Rescue and I would highly recommend it. It is honestly one of the most incredible things I've ever seen in my life.
Coming at number 9 is the Online Cannibal. I thought I knew about all the quote-unquote Hannibals in the world, but clearly I don't. Armin Meiwes was just your typical computer technician. I mean, if your typical computer technician enjoys cannibalism, then yeah, just your average Joe. Armin used to go on various websites advocating cannibalism and was a fan of the Cannibal Cafe, where people would post about their interest in cannibalism and wanting to do it. He then began putting up adverts on the cafe looking for someone to volunteer themselves to get eaten. I mean, at least he was asking for volunteers, not just going out and killing people. His ads said looking for a well-built 18 to 30-year-old to be slaughtered and then consumed, which I mean is as polite as it can get if you look at the context. He eventually found a willing volunteer called Bernd Brandes who went to Armin's house on March 9th, 2001. Brandes gave him permission to amputate his penis so that they could eat it together, so Armin fed him 20 sleeping pills and set up a bath for him after the amputation. The two tried to eat the penis, but it was just too chewy. When Brandes finally got out of the bath, he fainted due to immense blood loss, and now Armin was screwed. He was like, should I kill him? Should I not? He never agreed to being killed, but he did end up killing Brandes by stabbing him in the throat and then hanging his body on a meat hook. Keep in mind the two recorded the entire night, but I thoroughly hope the tape was destroyed. It definitely wasn't, but I hope. Armin continued to eat Brandes' body for 10 months post-murder. I mean, is human flesh even good for that long? Don't we have a best before date? I swear we do. Police eventually searched his home after he tried to solicit more victims online, and they found the videotape as well as the body parts that hadn't been eaten yet, and in a shocking plot twist turn of events, he apologized and then became a vegetarian. Guys, if this cannibal can become vegetarian, surely you can become vegan. Ayy. At number 8 we have the 20,000 Orphans, and this one happened right here in Canada, which I'm not proud of. Now back in the 50s, the Premier of Quebec was Maurice Duplessis, and he was a very devout Catholic. Now one day he decided the Catholic Church should be the only caretaker of the alcoholics, the poor, the unwed mothers, and all the orphans in the population. Trusting the church completely, he signed over the responsibility of all hospitals, orphanages, and schools to the church. But sadly, this was not a foolproof plan. Most of the orphans weren't even orphans, they were just born out of wedlock, but the church didn't approve of that, so they took the children away. So orphanages slowly started overflowing, and the government didn't have enough money to subsidize them. They were getting more money for psychiatric patients than they were the orphans, so the church decided to do something. According to the Lunatic Asylum Act, you could commit anyone to an insane asylum to A. maintain social order, B. help them, or C. care for them. So citing the maintenance of social order, they put 20,000 orphans into mental asylums. All of them were mentally able and fit, but they were admitted anyway. In the institutions, they were subjected to horrible treatment, getting mentally, physically, and sexually abused just for $1 more than what they'd get as orphans. By the end of the 60s, the asylum era was over, but 79% of those orphans said they couldn't maintain a normal, healthy adult existence, and despite all that, Maurice and the Catholic Church never apologized for ruining those children's lives. That's a long apology overdue, my friends. Filling our number 7 slot are the Silent Twins. Now I've heard this story many times now, but I know a lot of people still haven't, and it is a scarily weird event, so I thought I would just include it. So June and Jennifer Gibbons were a pair of identical twins born in Barbados but who grew up in Wales. In school, the girls used to be the only people of color there, which made them feel isolated, and to add to that isolation, both girls spoke so fast that understanding them was very hard. They were so severely bullied at school that the principal used to actually let them leave early every day to avoid being bullied. Their way of talking slowly got more and more unintelligible, to the point no one could understand them except each other. The twins at this point spoke to no one but each other and their little sister, and at school would refuse to read and write. In an attempt to get the girls to communicate with others, they were sent to different boarding schools in which they both became catatonic and withdrawn until reunited. By the 80s, the girls were committing crimes like arson, vandalism, and theft left and were later admitted to the mental health institution Broadmoor Hospital. They stayed there for 12 years, and the girls always had an agreement that if one of them died, the other had to speak to other people and live a normal life. During their 12-year stay, they began believing one of them absolutely had to die in order for the other to go on, so Jennifer agreed to be the sacrifice. One day when the girls were being transferred to another clinic, Jennifer could not be awakened upon arrival and then later died of acute myocarditis, which is a sudden inflammation of the heart. And that literally came out of nowhere because there were no drugs in her system, no poison. The only evidence was that the day before she kept saying she was dying and then the next day just died in June's lap. Now at number 6 is Dr. Marcel Petio. Marcel was a French doctor and a serial killer. I'm assuming one was his day job and the other was just a hobby. And you know what they say, don't quit your day job. Now how he killed people was during the occupation he would promise Jewish people and other people wanted by the Germans that he could secure safe passage for them outside of France. He'd tell them they would travel to Argentina through Portugal for 25,000 francs a person. Once people would pay him the money and go to his house, Marcel would tell them that Argentine officials required all entrants to be inoculated against any and all diseases, and as a doctor his victims would trust him to deliver the injection needed. But that injection wasn't a vaccine, it was cyanide. The injection would obviously kill them, and then he would take all their belongings and valuables and dispose of their bodies. At the start he would just dump them in the Seine River, but that seemed to be a lot of work for him, so he changed up his tactics and for more convenience would drown their bodies in acid or quicklime in his basement and incinerate them. He was caught when his neighbors complained to the police about a foul-ass stench coming from his house and the amount of smoke coming out of his chimney. In preparation of a fire hazard, which is what the police thought it was, police called firemen to his house who found a huge fire in his basement, and in the fire, human remains. Coming in at number 5 is the Chichijima Incident. Now let's flash back to World War II for a second. In September of 1944, Japanese forces shot down 9 American planes near the Japanese island of Chichijima. All 9 of the airmen tried to escape, but 8 were recaptured and 1 escaped, that one being 20-year-old George H.W. Bush. After the capture of the others, it was found out they had been brutally tortured and beaten before being killed. Each one was beheaded, and then American authorities found out that body parts of 4 of the victims were then eaten by Japanese officers. I don't even know what to say about this one. Just imagine Bush wasn't the one who survived and he was also eaten. He would have never become president. Would his son have become president? I don't even know. I feel like America would have turned out very different, I feel. What do you guys think? At number 4 is The Mad Butcher of Kingsbury Run, and I wish that was a title of a cute Enid Blyton book, but 'twas not, my friends. Was not. Also known as the Cleveland Torso Murderer, this person was never identified, but boy oh boy did he create hell in their 30s. He, they, she, you never know. The person was suspected to have killed 12 people, but modern research points to around 20 victims. Most of the victims were classed as the working poor and lived in shanty towns, which made them easier to target. The murderer would behead every single victim and then dismember them, usually severing their torso in half or at least severing their appendages. Had to be one or the other, am I right? All the male victims were castrated and a lot of them had chemicals all over their bodies. The victims ended up being found way after they were killed, sometimes more than a year later, but identifying them was the problem since they had no heads, just torsos. I mean, last time I checked, you can't identify someone from their belly button or their nipples, so what to do? Now the serial murders had everyone in Ohio worried, and the murderer even taunted Elliot Ness, the guy working on the case, by leaving the torsos of 2 of the victims in full view of his office. I mean, he didn't just rub salt in Elliot's wound, he just rubbed the torsos right in his wounds. I know that doesn't make sense, but Elliot would get it. Now at number 2 is the Jonestown Massacre. I know, you guys have heard it all before, but regardless, I did have to put it on the list. If you know the story, feel free to skip to number 1, but if not, stay tuned for a wildly sinister story. The People's Temple Agricultural Project, better known as Jonestown, was a massive city which was actually just a cult run by Jim Jones located in Guyana. The base of the cult was originally in Indianapolis, but after receiving heavy criticism, he moved his cult from location to location until finally leasing 3,800 acres of land in Georgetown. In the summer of 1977, Jones and his hundreds of followers moved to Jonestown, and by 1978 the population of the city had peaked at under 900 people. Life in the commune was bad, but for the followers they were reaching some sort of enlightenment. Jones's mental and physical health started declining rapidly. He had developed lung cancer and was actively abusing drugs like Valium, LSD, and barbiturates to name a few. Reporters and Congressman Leo Ryan came to Jonestown and were all assassinated. 5 people died, and despite later reporters saying they would say Jonestown was in good standing, the damage was done. Jim claimed he had failed and that all was lost. That night, a broadcast was made for every follower to return to their house. During that time, aides made huge metal tubs with grape flavored Kool-Aid that was poisoned with cyanide, Valium, chlorohydrate, and Phenergan. Jim called everyone to the pavilion after that, and he gave the death speech to his followers that was recorded and can actually be heard online, and soon after the members started drinking the poisoned Kool-Aid one by one. First was Roletta Paul and her 1-year-old infant. Like, they literally had to inject the poison into the kid's mouth to get the deed done. Death happened pretty quickly, 5 minutes for kids, even less for babies, and around half an hour for adults. That day, 918 people died in a mass suicide, which was the largest single loss of American civilian life until 9/11 happened.
Starting off this list in our number 10 spot, we have Frank Selleck. Frank Selleck is both the unluckiest, but also maybe the luckiest man to ever exist, and his story could totally be an action-packed thriller. So the first instance of his insane unlucky luck comes from 1962. In this year, he was in an accident where a train derailed and subsequently went into a river. Sadly, most of the people on board passed away in the incident, but he survived with only a broken arm, and he was also suffering from hypothermia. The next incident happened just a year later on his very first plane ride ever. Well, he was seated next to a faulty door and ended up being pulled out of the plane and somehow miraculously landed in a haystack and survived. While the plane went on to crash, and 19 others who were also pulled out of the plane, and sadly their fates were not the same. He survived a bus he was on going into the lake, he survived his car's fuel tank exploding, and just to top off this unlucky luck with some real regular luck, the first time he played the lottery, he won £600,000. He is also extremely generous, as it is said that he decided to give most of his winnings away to his friends and family, but he did keep a little for himself in order to complete a personal passion project.
Next up at number 9, we have the end of passwords. Passwords have been a huge part of our lives. You can probably think of about 3 different passwords you've used right now. But you see, that's the problem. People tend to use the same ones. They tend to be something related to them, and most passwords are actually quite easy to crack, especially if you're a computer. Not sure how many of you are though. The future lies with recognition software. It's already started with phones scanning your thumbprints, voice recognition is already creeping in, then there'll be retinal scans or even heartbeat scans. Everything you need a password for will measure your body in a way that cannot be faked to make sure it's really you, unless you grab someone else's eyeballs like Tom Cruise did in Minority Report. At number 8 now, we have the end of the gas car. In the UK, you'll know gas as petrol, but whatever you call it, it's the stuff that people have been fueling their cars with since pretty much the things were invented. It's been 100 years now since the rise of the gas car, and finally things are changing. Companies like Tesla have led the way when it comes to the electric car. Many people said it would never take off because of how expensive they were or how impractical it was to charge an electric car, but that's all changing. The prices are now tumbling, batteries are getting more efficient at charging, and it's becoming ever easier to own and drive an electric car. Next up at number 7, we have climate change. If you're a young person watching this video, you're going to live to see the planet change more rapidly than it's ever done before. At the moment, the planet is about 0.8 degrees higher in temperature than normal. That's already quite concerning, but by 2052 it will be at 2 degrees and then 2.8 degrees in 2080. Now with this comes everything I'm sure you've heard about before. More rain in rainy areas, more extreme weather such as strong winds and heat waves, as well as glaciers melting. It may be so drastic in some parts of the world that you'll be able to physically feel a difference from today compared with the future. Coming in at number 6 now, we have the Mars landings. In 1969, America landed astronauts on the moon. They had won the space race. It was an incredible achievement watched by millions of people around the world. Well, for many of you guys watching this, you may live to see the Mars landings. If they prove to be profitable, possible, we could see the dawn of a new space age on Earth. In 2016, NASA announced they plan to put a human on Mars by the 2030s. Private companies like Elon Musk's SpaceX have even more ambitious dates lined up. Some people think they could send a shuttle crew to Mars in the mid-2020s. Never mind this happening in your lifetime, it could happen in your cat's lifetime. I'm sure they're really excited about that one. At number 5 now, we have no more cash. When I was a kid, there were only a few certain places where you could use a debit or credit card. These days though, in most western cities, you can go your whole day without ever touching a single coin or banknote. This trend looks likely to continue until its ultimate conclusion, a totally cashless society. Some experts think that within the next 40 years, we might see the end of physical currency altogether. It costs governments billions to produce and maintain physical currency, and if nobody is using it, why bother making it? Next up at number 4 now, we have the end of the language barrier. If you're watching this video right now, that means you have some form of internet access and can easily Google how something is said in any other language. However, it's still quite hard to use that to have a fluent conversation. Things are changing though. Companies like Google and DARPA are perfecting instant translation tools, and when I say instant, I mean instant. You will be hearing it as the person says it. If voice replication technology continues to improve as well, you may even hear it in their voice. I wonder if I should have taken all those French lessons. Coming in at number 3 now, we have the first person to reach 150 years old. It sounds crazy, doesn't it? But some experts think the first person to reach the age of 150 has already been born. Thanks to improved healthcare and diet, the oldest age of a human being is a record that is constantly being beaten. Right now, it's held by Violet Brown, a 117-year-old woman from Jamaica. The overall record is held by Jean Calment, who lived to the age of 122. At the rate things are going, it's very likely that the first person to reach 150 will get there within the near future, meaning they're already alive right now. Maybe it's one of you guys watching this. Maybe it's me. Huh. Next up at number 2 now, we have nanotechnology. You've probably heard the word before and it's probably sounded like science fiction, but it is coming. Nanotechnology is the manipulation of matter that's not much bigger than the size of a DNA molecule. Scientists have been getting better at this for a while now, and within your lifetime you will probably get to see it firsthand. Cells can be programmed to heal wounds, treat stroke damage, or bring youth back to aging organs. Tiny nanobots could live in your body doing the job of your immune system, except about 1,000,000 times better. Chemotherapy could deliver treatment directly to the cells that have cancer, paving the way for a total cure. The possibilities are endless and they could be just around the corner. And finally at number 1 now, we have self-cleaning clothes. I thought I'd end this with a bit of a fun one, but it is totally going to become a reality one day. Hopefully sooner rather than later. Engineers in China have developed a coating for clothes that gets rid of any stain or odor when you step out into the sun. That's it. That's all you have to do. Scientists in South Korea have everything else covered after they developed a robotic fish that can clean clothes for you on the microscopic level. This might all sound very ridiculous and science fiction-y, but surprisingly, this is one of the most likely things that happen on our list. In the future, people may even look back on this time where we had to scrub our clothes by spinning them round in hot soapy water and think we were no better than cave people with washing machines.